In this episode, we're finally back in the workshop with the XJS. We're going to change some oil and we're going to have a look at a really common leak and fix that. Here we are in the workshop. The XJS is already up on jack stands. I have the hood open. I have some protective covers on the fenders. So let's head on over to the workbench and I'll show you everything you need to change the oil on a V12 XJS. Just a quick thing before we head on over to the workbench. If you like any of the products in this video and you want to purchase them yourself, there are links to them down below to where you can buy them. Anyways, back to the workbench. Here's everything you need to change your oil. You need a oil filter. I like to use a genuine Jaguar oil filter, just because I know it will fit perfectly, and also it looks really nice. There's the part number, EBC9658. And this filter fits a lot of Jags, so it's good for most of them. You need a 7/8 inch wrench or socket. Some type of oil filter wrench. I really like this chain type, works really well. Some type of funnel to pour the oil in, and the oil itself, and there's a lot of it, about 10 liters to change on a V12. This car has been running on synthetic for probably at least 10 or 15 years, so I went with Amsoil full synthetic Z-Rod 2050. This is a really good oil. Also, it has a high sink formula, which is really good for the tappets and camshafts on these old engines. The only thing with the sink content is that you need to check with your car if it's alright to run this if you have catalytic converters. I believe that sink is not advisable if you have catalytic converters, but don't quote me on that, you can check that yourself. This car does not have catalytic converters, they have been removed because it has straight pipes in the beginning. So this will be a great oil for this engine. Since the lower oil pan is weeping a tiny bit, I have a new gasket as well. So I'll be replacing that at the same time and cleaning out that lower pan. On these later V12s, the oil plug is located at the rear. On some earlier ones, it's up here on the side, which I can show you on my white V12 at some point. But on this 91, it's back here. So just get your wrench on there, and there we go. These should not be that tight because you should be able to get them off pretty easily. There's a washer that makes sure it seals. Get your oil pan. Also, make sure you have a large collection pan. This is a 20 liter one, or maybe it's a 15, I'm not really sure. But there's 10 liters in there. Most oil pans are only made for maybe about 6 or 8 liters, which is close to 6 or 8 quarts. But these engines, they take 10 liters or about 10 quarts, which is a lot of oil. So prepare by getting a big one, so otherwise it might overflow halfway through changing oil and it makes a huge mess. And there we go. Usually I let my oil drain for as long as possible, sometimes even overnight, to get all the old oil out. But since I'm removing the lower pan today, I'm not really going to bother with that. I'll let all of it pour out till it's just trickling or dripping, and then I'll remove the pan, and then I can get all the last stuff and gunk out of there. If you have access to a second drain pan while the oil is draining, you can start to remove the oil filter. There are lots of different wrenches for removing filters. Just get one that you think works well and gently work it out. Especially on these V12s, it's pretty tight in here, but once you just knock it loose, it's pretty easy to get out. Make sure you have a pan ready under the filter. While the last stuff is draining, we can prepare the new oil filter. I like to pre-fill oil filters whenever I can, and in this case, with the filter going straight up, you can definitely fill it up all the way. This aids in the engine getting oil pressure right away on initial startup after the oil change. So just grab some oil and gently pour it in here. You can fill it up all the way, and then usually wait, and as you see, it drains away. It takes quite a lot to fill one of these filters. You don't really have to fill it all the way. It just helps in that initial startup. Take a little bit of oil on your finger and smear it on the gasket here. That just eases that installation process and just makes it seal that much better. Now I'd say that's sufficiently full and is ready to install on the car. Grab a clean rag and just wipe off any of the old oil up at the oil filter housing. Now you can grab that new oil filter and install it. Once the filter makes contact, you're supposed to turn it another quarter turn about, and then you check for leaks once you start up. But these should really only be hand tight. They have a large rubber washer on them, or like a seal. They're going to seal no problem. So there, that's tight enough. If this was a normal oil change, you'll pretty much be done now. You just put in the sump plug again with a new washer, simply fill up with the correct amount of oil, put the car back on the ground, start it up, turn it off after a few minutes, and then check the level and fill it up until it's full. But this gasket here is slightly weeping. It's a tiny amount, but it would be silly not to replace this gasket while you're doing an oil change. So I'm gonna grab a 1/2 inch ratchet and remove this lower oil pan here so we can replace the gasket. Now it's a little while later and the lower sump is finally off. Got all these 22 bolts that are all the way around this off, so it takes quite a while, and then you just simply knock it with a soft rubber mallet and it comes off. So here are all the bolts. Some of them are short like this and some of them are a little bit longer, and there is one that has a spacer since it holds a bracket that holds the coolant lines for the transmission. Speaking of the transmission, on these late cars you need to remove this, which is the cover between the engine and transmission that gets to the torque converter bolts. It has to be removed because these two little ears here cover up the back of the pan. So that just took a little bit extra time. But it's pretty clean inside. I don't think it's ever been off since 1991. The only thing I found in here was a tiny piece of gasket. Looks like it's a part of the valve cover, so that's probably been replaced at once. It's really, a hard old gasket. So I'm just gonna drain out the last of the oil here and clean this out so we can remove this old gasket and put it all back on the car again. Now I'll put a light coat of Hylamar Blue gasket on here. This stuff is really great because it never really cures. It stays sticky all the time, so it's super easy to take apart again. And it's not like regular RTV that just sticks and gets hard. You can take this off whenever you want. Now this is ready to go back onto the car, and here are all the bolts. Now everything is back in place, and I put the rear cover in as well, and that sensor. Now it's time to fill up with oil. These V12s take about 10 liters of oil, but I'm going to start with just pouring in 9 and then checking the level once the car is back on the ground. Just put the oil cap back on. And now you're ready to start it up. For a minute or so, turn it off and check your level and fill until the full mark. I'm not going to do that right now since I have a few other things I want to do to this car while it's up in the air, but that's coming in a future video. And it's as simple as that. So now we have some fresh Amsoil in the engine, a new filter, and hopefully no leaks. As you see, it's not a difficult engine at all to change oil on. You just make sure that you have a large drain pan, since it takes a lot more oil than most common engines out there. Replacing that sump gasket also is really simple, and it's really nice because it can be done with the engine in place. The upper pan gasket, however, is a completely different story. The front subframe is in the way, but the lower one is the one that usually leaks or weeps more. And also, it's a good idea to take that sump off and clean it out, because you see, even on this pretty low mile car, I found some gasket material in there from some previous service work, so that was really great to get that out of there. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video and you're not already subscribed, I highly recommend that you do. I put out new videos every Thursday, and you can have a look down in my channel to see previous videos on this XJS. I also have a Jaguar XJ12 I do some work on, and an S-Type project car which is coming along. Until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.